the English 1 teachers and English 4 teachers at Baldwin Middle Senior High School. I'm very excited to get to meet everybody today. What we're going to be doing is going over during this open house a lot of my course expectations, guidelines, and just general useful information for you to get to know me and how my class works and how this overall course is structured for your students. I'm very excited to present today and talk to all of you about the class. So we're going to go ahead and begin with our presentation. So, welcome parents. Like I said, my name is Mr. Ragsdale. I'm located in room 113 at Baldwin. That's at the very end of the hallway in the main building once you get past the main office. Here's a picture of me. I know you just saw my face, but you can get to know me a little bit more. So I graduated from the University of Florida in 2019 with a bachelor's in English with a concentration in 19th century American literature, but I also have extensive background with English education, both at the college level and at the high school level. To know a little bit about me, I, as an English teacher, naturally like to read. Specifically, I like to read classic literature, love comic books. I'm definitely a superhero nerd and a bit of a superhero buff, if I may say so. And I love science fiction. I listen to lots of different music, but my favorite genre is certainly blues music and everything adjacent to it. And of course, when I'm not doing those things in my spare time, I use the rest of it just adoring my dog, Archie, as featured right here. You can see his eyes are closed right now in this picture. I just like to pretend that he is making a wish in this picture. So that's a little bit about me, but what I want us to go over during this presentation are these specific 8 items, which is mostly everything that's covered in the syllabus, which will detail course expectations, guidelines, and give you a good all-around view of how the class works. And we'll be talking about the texts that the students and I will be engaging with this year, our course expectations, grading policy, attendance policy, how to turn in work, late work policy, or what to do if you are absent in person or online, extra credit, and certain guidelines I have for when students send in emails or upload assignments. For my English 1 parents, the first, second, third, fourth quarter, we all have very interesting texts that we're going to be reading. Our first quarter text is the Odyssey by Homer, a classic Greek epic poem, one of the most exciting stories of the great literatures. I'm sure the students are, I know the students are currently enjoying this text. The second quarter, we'll be reading John Steinbeck's Of Mice and Men, a much different vibe and much different storytelling style in comparison to the Odyssey, but I'm excited to see some great responses from the students for Steinbeck. The third quarter is going to be very Shakespearean for both English 1 and English 4 students. We'll be reading Romeo and Juliet for the third quarter. And the fourth quarter is going to be A Long Way Gone, Memoirs of a Boy Soldier by Ishmael B. for the fourth quarter. English 4 students, our first quarter, we aren't working with a novel or major text per se. We are just kind of doing our readings out of our class textbook, which offers a variety of different readings organized thematically. At the moment of this recording, our seniors are currently reading Vindication of the Rights of Women by Mary Wollstonecraft, which interestingly enough, she is the mother of one of the other authors that we'll be reading this year. Mary Wollstonecraft, of course, was the mother of Mary Shelley, who wrote Frankenstein. So as you can see, a lot of our class texts, they are organized thematically and conceptually in ways that are really exciting. The second quarter, we're going to be reading 1984 by George Orwell. The third quarter, like I said, it's going to be very Shakespearean. We'll be reading Hamlet by William Shakespeare. And as I mentioned earlier, the fourth quarter, and I'm most excited about this because it is my favorite novel of all time, would be Frankenstein by Mary Shelley. I didn't say this previously, but all of these textbooks are provided to the students for free through the school, both online and in the classroom. Now, students are welcome to go out and get their own copies if they wish. If so, I just would hope that they would reach out to me so I can make sure that they understand exactly which edition of the book to get, especially when it comes to Frankenstein or any of the Shakespearean works. Moving along, we'll be discussing the 5 course expectations I have for this class. The first one is, and this is for mostly targeted towards our hybrid students. So this is good if you're a parent whose child goes to school some days out of the week and stays home others. If you're a do-all homeroom parent, then it's a bit of a different story, but nonetheless, this is still useful information. I expect for my students to give equal attention to online and face-to-face instruction. That means that while the hybrid model only requires students to physically attend class 2 days out of the week, this does not equate to a 2-day school week. So to do well in my class, my students must give equal attention to their in-person and online education. There may be lessons that are handled entirely online, and those students will be responsible to be mindful of those online lessons and resources. So it's very important that the students during our online days, although there can be a lot going on at home, it can be a rather chaotic setting if it's anything like my household. But it's important for the students to be seated with the devices that they need as best as they can with as many of the resources they have at their disposal so that they can really do well when we're online. Respect is the second class expectation. Again, this is for hybrid students. Duval homeroom students, parents can still infer from this useful information. I expect my students to demonstrate respect for others and the teacher by using appropriate language, being prepared for class, following directions, adhering to all school and district policies, and by keeping an open mind when learning about different cultures, traditions, beliefs, and lifestyles. I like to tell my students that reading is about taking yourself outside of your own head and into the shoes of somebody else. You're not truly reading something if you're not reading to understand something different from what you already know. So if you're not willing to engage in different cultures, traditions, or beliefs or lifestyles, you're not actually reading. This is a safe learning environment at the same time. So what this really boils down to is that, sometimes we may have to agree to disagree, but I run my classroom in such a way where everyone is entitled to speak and share his or her own opinion. In fact, I'll oftentimes encourage discussion that might be rather provocative, but always, always, always with strict adherence to the fact that we must respect our classmates and their opinions. On top of this, students are to practice safe transmission lowering behavior. That means masks are required. They must socially distance when possible. I have arranged to the best of my ability our in-classroom instruction to space the students as far apart as they can be, again, to the best of my ability. And of course, our students are not to invade each other's personal space, nor are they to leave their seat without teacher's permission. Expectation number 3 is to be prepared and on time. Students should always come to class prepared. This includes being present physically and digitally at the assigned start time. Presence in the classroom is essential to success. Tardiness and unexcused absences will have an adverse effect on one's grade. This counts for online students too. So online attendance will be taken through a Microsoft Form Teams sign-in form. It's at the top of everyone's team page for my classes. It should be for all their classes. And we'll talk a little bit more about attendance policy in just a second. Email and uploads etiquette. So this is something that might be a bit more unique to my class than others, but it's very important to me that my students present themselves professionally and know how to communicate professionally. And a lot of that has to do with how do we send emails? How do we send uploads? How do we communicate digitally? So my students are, of course, welcome to email me any questions or requests that they have, so long as they do so in a timely manner and follow my email up etiquette guidelines. The more time I have, naturally, as you understand, to respond to a student or one of your child's needs, the more likely I'll be able to do my best to help them, so that I'm not scrambling at the last second to figure out what can be done to help your child. Emails that do not meet these requirements will not receive a response other than an instruction to resend the email properly. So again, I'm a bit of a stickler with making sure students, when they email me in a professional manner and in a timely manner, mostly to create a culture within the classroom that students are to take responsibility for their coursework and their education and with how they present themselves. Oftentimes, students might have to upload an assignment to Focus, Teams, or type their answers on a Word document within Teams. We'll talk a little bit about how students are expected to turn in their work in this classroom in just a second. But I do encourage that all my students use the proper MLA formatting style and header. This will certainly serve my English 1 students for the rest of their careers at Baldwin and beyond. So Uploads without the appropriate header and format will not be accepted. At this moment in time, all students have been taught and given ample resources to understand MLA style, but I understand it's also can be a rather tricky thing, and if a student's ever struggling with MLA or you notice that your child is losing points for MLA type things, they can always come to me during tutoring, or you can reach out to me and I can provide resources to make sure that the child understands exactly how MLA style works. And lastly, take ownership of your education. So I really try to instill a culture in my classrooms that's for students to take personal responsibility for their learning, that they set goals for themselves, evaluate their progress toward those goals, adhere to standards, and revise their performance when needed. Again, this is the student's education, and it's important for them to get everything they can out of it. And of course, I'll be doing everything I can to facilitate that learning and make the environment we're in conducive for that learning. But at the end of the day, there's a degree of ownership that must be felt among the students. Okay, let's talk grades. So grades in this class are weighted by category. Each quarter, students will receive grades for assignments that assess their progress in writing, reading, speaking, and listening. These grades are updated weekly as appropriate to the curriculum. So like I said, grades are based on standards. So the Florida standards that they are all held to. 25% of the grade is based on reading. 20% of the grade is based on writing and language standards. Students will oftentimes have to give presentations or demonstrate listening skills and speaking skills. That's worth 20% of their grade. And their achieves. It's very important not to neglect these, but these in sum are worth 30% of a student's final grade. So let's say a student has a 70% in the class, or say a 60% in the class, but they've not done a single achieve. If they did their achieves, their grade would be a 90%. So it's really important that their achieves are taken rather seriously. Okay, attendance policy. As we've mentioned in the classroom expectations, students should have equal attention given to the online and in-person elements of the class, and this includes attendance. Students will be marked as tardy if they arrive 5 minutes or later to a class in person, and same deal for online. Online attendance, as we discussed, will be taken with an MS Forms document on Teams. Let's talk about turning in work. Most classwork will be completed in Teams. I'm trying to keep the classroom environment as paperless as possible as we navigate this pandemic, but I will sometimes require students to access files or upload files to Focus, in which case that will be less common, but they'll have express directions to do so. And technological issues happen all the time. Certainly lockdown has become a wonderful exercise in flexibility. So it's very important for students to have adaptive learning strategies, and that they're able to, if they arrive at a roadblock for some technical issue, that they understand what resources they have to work around that. And a good workaround is if students can't access their Teams or they can't access Focus, they likely can access their email, and they can always email me their assignments just to make sure that I have them. A late work. All assigned work is required. In the event of an absence, the student has the same number of days to turn in work as were missed without penalty. And it's a 1-for-1 ratio. For every 1 day absent, that student will have 1 day to make up their work. Late work is penalized at a rate of 10% off per school day, so I don't count the weekends. And after 1 week, the highest a student may score is at 50% on the assignment. So since work is assigned to help the student master a skill, it must be completed even if it is late. So in other words, if a student, say, does not turn in an assignment, it would be far better for them to complete that assignment, master that skill, and then have a 50% instead of a 0%, because those 50 points really goes a long way. Students must attach a completed late slip to the assignment before submitting it. Students must email me to receive a late slip. Late work will not be graded until the late slip has been completely filled out and uploaded with the late assignment to Focus. So late work is going to be relegated to Focus. But again, if there's an issue with Focus, the thing to do would be to email me. I do have some rather fun extra credit opportunities for my students. During the last 3 weeks of each quarter, my students can make a meme and post it on our meme page to drop their lowest scored grade. So if they have a 0 on the grade book, they can drop that 0 if they make me a meme that's relevant to the class. Now the meme should be original, it should be directly related to class content, and include a separate paragraph explaining the meme, stating why they made it in the way that they did. We're going to have a meme workshop pretty soon, so that for this first quarter, students of a good idea of how to produce their memes. And I kind of included an example right here. For our English 4 parents, your students are going to be learning and reading Frankenstein in the 4th quarter. So here's a Frankenstein meme. We might be familiar with this format. We have a person over here who's got a tiny brain that becomes a bigger brain, then it becomes this sort of transcendent, glowing brain. And it's supposed to mirror one's understanding of Frankenstein as they continue to read. And first, people believe that Frankenstein was the monster because they've not read the story and they confuse the creator with his creation. Then they learn that Frankenstein wasn't the monster because Frankenstein is the young man who invents the monster, not the monster himself. But then the students learn that Frankenstein was figuratively the monster the whole time. But of course, it wouldn't be enough just to show me this meme. Students have to write a paragraph attending it, which is depicted here on the left. And it reads, many people confuse Victor Frankenstein for his monster, which has no name and is only called creature, but they are only half right. Victor is not the monster, but he is a monster. And so the students are supposed to explain why they chose the images that they did and explain the text that they chose as well. So in this description, the student wrote, I chose these images for my meme because they emphasize human anatomy and higher understanding or enlightenment, both of which are major topics of the novel. The way the text returns to the beginning statement mirrors Walton's journey, another character in the story, as he too returns to where he started after learning who Victor is. So in Frankenstein, it's a frame narrative that begins with an Arctic explorer who meets Victor Frankenstein in the North Pole. And he discovers that he's not going to be able to complete his Arctic journey, so he has to return home. So the student rather wittily mentions how the reader returns to this original understanding of Frankenstein with more information from an informed perspective, even though they're still back at where they started from, just like Walton does in the novel. So I mentioned that I'm a bit of a stickler for emails, and basically this is something that we all know as adults, but emails should include a subject, a salutation, their main text, and a sign-off. It's very important to me that the students capitalize names and places and they use the spell check feature. This is not just for me to be a meanie pants about my email expectations, but simply so that students can learn now how to present themselves as professionals, a life skill that will serve them both here in the classroom and outside of it. So here's a good example of a student who emailed me the right way. I'll be honest, it's not a real student. I made this email up. I don't have anyone named Billy Bob, but it says, Mr. Ragsdale, this is Billy Bob. I'm in your first period class. My student number is 1234567 I have a B+ in your class and I want to get an A. What are my options for improving my grade before the quarter is over in a few weeks? Best, Billy Bob. So it's very important that my students, when they email me, they do so in a way that's professional and timely. The student, for in this example, wants to know about something that's going to be happening in a few weeks. They're not emailing me about something that happened yesterday or last week. They're paying attention to the writing rules, which they've learned throughout their lives and in my own classroom, which is very important because people are taken more seriously when they present as professionally, when they present professionally, and it's just very important that students learn this life skill, and I encourage it in my own classroom. So this is an example of how not to email me, where it says, hey, Mr. Ragsdale, it's me. I just turned in my assignments for last week, and can you update the grade book? Thanks. So if you have if one of your children says that Mr. Ragsdale is not responding to my emails, it could be that they're sending me emails that look like this, as opposed to emails that look like this, in which case I have an automated reply that I send them with instructions how to send the email correctly. But also I'll usually in the post description section answer their email just so they get an answer at the same time. So I'm not ignoring the students, but I'm also reminding them that I have certain expectations on how we should present ourselves in the classroom. Upload guidelines. So something that's really important is I don't want students to just take pictures of their assignments and upload those to Focus or email them to me or put them on Teams. I would much rather they use a scanner. Now, not everyone has access to a printer or a scanner, but most people have access to a smartphone. If you have a smartphone, you have access to a scanner. And there are two options. You can either use Adobe Scan if you're an Android user, or if you are an iPhone user, you can use the Notes app to scan documents. It's just a way to very professionally present your documents. And again, this is a skill that's going to serve them very well in the future, say when they try to sign a lease for their first apartment, or they have to get paperwork to a doctor's office, or they have to do this or that. You know, it's very important for these life skills to know how to handle these documents. Okay, so to review, emails and uploads won't be accepted if they're not properly formatted. This can result in a late work penalty. Late work must be submitted with a late slip, and the students can email me for the slip. Grading is standard base. I have extra credit and grade recovery options available. I did not talk about grade recovery too much during this presentation because it's something that does not often happen, but just understand that if a student falls behind, let's say a student does very poorly one quarter, I have options available to help them improve that grade and redo that grade from that previous quarter, but that is always a last resort. And of course, my tutoring hours, I am here perhaps because I'm something of a masochist, but I am here from 2 p.m. to 4 p.m. on Friday. So I do sacrifice my Friday afternoons and early evenings for my students. I try to stay pretty late so that students who are maybe doing sports or club activities also have time to see me during tutoring. So tutoring is in room 113 from 2 p.m. to 4 p.m. That's all I have for my presentation. I do just want to add one quick note about attendance. If a student is absent, they have that one-for-one rule on what to do in terms of their absence. They're absent one day, they have an extra day to complete their work. But I just want to add that if a student is late or absent to class and it's an online course, that student must email me with an explanation as to why they are absent. And if they are absent because of a doctor's visit or some other, typical life administrative task that needs to be done, I just simply request that I have access to the doctor's note or just some documentation for myself to understand the student's absence. So thank you everyone for attending the open house. I hope we all learned a lot about one another. If you have any questions, please feel free to email me. The email guidelines rule is really for the students, so you don't have to. I will respond to your emails if they're not perfectly formatted. It's just there for the students, really. But I hope you guys have a great day. Thank you for coming. I'm very excited to get to know you all a little bit better and continue working with your students.